Assalamu alaikum, ma'am.
Yeah, walaikum salam and good afternoon. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Myself, Dr. Zishan. I am from Integral University. I am coordinating this program.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I came to know that it is combined collaboration between two of you.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think the participants have not yet joined. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. They are joining. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. We'll wait for 2 minutes. Then.
Yes, ma'am. Just 2 minutes, ma'am. I'll introduce you.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. I will introduce you for to the participant for 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
then you can you please continue.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Dear participants, please mute your mic. Mazhar sir, please make me co-host. Dear participants, please inform your colleagues and fast. Ma'am is already here. मजहर साहब अगर आप सुन रहे हैं प्लीज. Dear participants, please mute your mic. अच्छा, कोई मुझे को-होस्ट बना सकता है? ये पर नंबर नहीं है उसका. अच्छा, ओके ओके. मिस्टर वारिस, hello, anybody from HRDC MU? Dr. Mubin Ahmed. Ma'am, just give me 1 minute.
Okay, okay, okay.
Mr. Waris from HRDC MU, are you listening? Mr. Waris?
I think Dr. Raza Khan, we can start. It is already about 4:36.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's start.
Yes.
Let's start.
Ma'am, actually, so I cannot mute this participant, that Mubin Ahmed.
No, that doesn't matter. You please go ahead. We can take care of him later.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So, dear participants and ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu, a distinguished educationalist whose career of nearly 4 decades reflects her outstanding contribution to academia and educational policy in India. She has held several pivotal positions, most notably as officer on special duty for new education policy in Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, where she served as secretary to the committee that drafted the National Education Policy 2020. Earlier, as the nodal officer for the National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, she oversaw the establishment of 95 faculty development centers and training of more than 5 lakh educators. Dr. Shamsu holds a PhD in distance education, a master's degree in political science with a gold medal, a postgraduate diploma in distance education, and a law degree. She has authored numerous articles in reputed international journals and contributed chapters to several books. Her influence extends globally. She has participated in national and international conferences and served on committees for the Government of India, state governments, UGC, and US India Educational Foundations, Fulbright Nehru, the Fulbright National Selection Committees. Currently, she serves as honorary advisor as the Center for Public Policy and Research, Kochi, is on her advisory board of Universal Engineering College, Kerala, and mentors women leaders under Rising Beyond the Ceiling initiative. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu. Ma'am, we are honored to have you in this session. I'm sorry for this glitch issue. I'll try to take it up, and you please continue with your
Okay.
session. Thank
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raza. And let me request all the participants to keep their videos on. I don't like an online session in which only the resource person and the program coordinator has their videos. All participants may please switch on their videos so that we have a very face-to-face interaction. I think by now we should know by 2020 we were doing the online sessions. We were not very familiar, but it is basic etiquette when an online session is on that all the participants and all those who are present in the virtual room, please switch on your videos and keep it on during the entire duration of the session. Maybe some resource persons do not instruct you to do that, but please take that as a learning from here that basically in all online sessions, you should be able to keep your videos on. In fact, in all the sessions that we hold at the international level, the instruction is that if someone's video is not on, they should be thrown out of the meeting room completely so that they are not attending the session at all. So please switch on your videos. And it is about 4:40 now, and we are supposed to be talking on a very pertinent topic of governance and management in higher education as envisaged through the National Education Policy 2020. However, I would still like, because I normally follow a flip mode, I would still like a couple of participants, maybe for about 5 minutes. I can have the luxury of listening to a couple of y'all on any thoughts that you feel that you would like to share before the session commences from my side on the national education policy. Don't confine yourself to the theme of governance and management on any aspect of the national education policy. Please feel free to share some few thoughts that would give me some insights into how you are having, let us say, operational issues of NEP implementation. Please.
you. Dear participant, please, ma'am, if just to begin with the conversation,
Yeah.
it's really means nice to tell you that in Integral University we are implementing the NEP 2020 provisions in all the areas and domain where it is applicable, and mostly in sciences, science faculty, we have implemented it completely. And in engineering section, we have our students in second year right now who are studying under NEP guidelines. And so we have completed 2 years for our students in engineering stream, and we try to adopt the multiple entry and exit and other streams gradually as much we can. So it's in transition phase right now in our university, and few courses have completely adopted and they have passed it. They have got their degrees. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. I know that all the universities are at various stages of implementing it. But if there are any other participants who would like to share their thoughts on any aspect of the national education policy, please. I do have a couple of minutes before I can jump into the topic. And once again, my request to keep the videos on. I find only a couple of you all have switched on the videos. All others seem to be still wanting to be just vicariously present over there, which is not the manner in which the rigor of a training program happens. I don't think when you have an offline session, the resource person enters into the room and between the resource person and the participants, you have a black curtain being put across. Are we trying to do that? And are we trying to show that in India, our institutions are not capable of understanding the spirit of online training? Let us not reduce this to a mockery, and I don't think that rigor should be lost. So please put on all the participants, please put on your videos. I know that there is no bandwidth issues for a bulk of you all. So unless you have a serious bandwidth issue, I would request all of you to put on the videos. Yeah, can I get one more participant other than our own program coordinator, Dr. Raza, who was kind enough to share, to give me some thoughts?
Dr. Sushil? Am I any other participant, please? डॉक्टर नसीम, आपका माइक म्यूट है. डू यू वांट टू टेल एनीथिंग?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I think ma'am is audible. Ma'am is asking to share your thoughts on NEP.
Anything. I just want to hear a couple of you all before I really get into the topic.
Sir, NEP mainly multiple entry, multiple exit option, which is the best option, and all technologies are embedded in this NEP 2020.
Okay, so you are of the view that the giving of multiple entry and exit is good enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Many a times participants seem to be of a very different view. So I'm happy to hear that someone seems to be thinking that that was a good option that we have introduced in the NEP. Any other thoughts who would like to echo on that same topic? Anybody else who would like to share something on that? See, the idea that I'm trying to really, when I'm trying to do a flip mode, is to really try and assess for myself. As faculty, are we still not matured enough to try pedagogies which allow you in your own classroom scenarios to actually have a lot of learner engagement? The silence that comes in online sessions when I am inviting views gives me a very disappointing picture that in all probability in our higher education institutions, we are not really exploring beyond the lecture mode, and we are not able to think of allowing learners to have an active role. That accounts for the passive response from faculty when there is an option given to you as faculty during an online session where you're invited to share your views. Your silence reflects that in your own classroom scenarios, maybe you do not encourage students to ask questions and you do not have interactive pedagogies, which in a certain way for me is a kind of a real life understanding of why our higher education institutions have very poor learning outcomes. And we are not able to bring about that paradigm shift. So having echoed my clear disappointment in seeing that this center also under the Integral University is not having participants who are able to have interactive pedagogies, let me get into the topic on hand, which is on governance and management in higher education. The first and foremost important part that I would like you to understand is why is this topic being included as a part of the NEP sensitization and orientation program. The simple fact is that it is important as faculty to understand that we must be sensitized to the entire scenario of the higher education in the country so that we rise up to the challenges that the system is posing before us. It is not just the appointment letter which tells us that you are appointed as an assistant professor for sociology or mechanical engineering or political science or economics, and that your job is only to go there, talk for a certain number of hours and walk out of the institution and think that we've done a wonderful job in actually educating our young scholars. It is absolutely essential that as educators, we try and understand the larger picture of what India's higher education system faces. And basically, all of you have to begin to understand and personally be convinced that you all are academic leaders in the making. And that academic leadership is not something that happens when we have gray hair on our head and when we are there in the system for 30, 40 years. But even as I join as an assistant professor, that I'm basically a young academic leader and I should be able to drive a lot of change and I should be able to lead and I should be able to strategize and so on. So we look at leadership in higher education, mainly academic leadership in higher education at three levels. At the entry level, which is the young academic leader, then a mid-level, which can be sort of co-aligned with the idea of an associate professor, and the senior management, which comes at the professor level and where you think in terms of going to much higher positions as the directors of the institutions and maybe vice chancellors, proctors, many other positions where at the associate level you can think of deans and so on, or HODs that you can think of. But at the entry level also, we as young faculty must be convinced of the fact that we are academic leaders in the making. Why this is important is that India as a canvas of higher education has proven that quantitatively we are a very large setup, but qualitatively we are at an abysmally low performing country. And which is very sad, because while it is not because of various factors of infrastructure lacking and faculty deficits, it's more about an attitude where we think about a job as a faculty more or less like a clerk in a government office, not looking at the learning outcomes that our young graduates have to come out with. And that has resulted in very low employability and so on. So in my session today, it's about 4:40 now, 4:50 now, and I will be trying to sort of firstly look at what are the challenges that India's higher education system faced, which we recognized in the national education policy. How did the NEP in a way try to address these challenges through governance reforms, through structural reforms, through process related reforms, through technological reforms and so on. Then look at academic leadership in the context of why that is the most critical factor that might bring about impactful changes in the terms of the quality of higher education. And then look at what NEP has talked about as instrumentalities of good governance in terms of the governance structures and in terms of a document that we call the institutional development plan. Maybe if time permits, I will try to look at the external regulation part, but if time doesn't permit, then I think I'll just say that in a line or so. Coming to the challenges of India's higher education system, I just mentioned India happens to have one of the largest higher education systems in the world, with about 1,200 universities, about 13 to 14,000 standalone institutions, around 48,000 affiliated colleges, 1.6 million faculty, and about 44 million students. In terms of numbers, it is very massive, in fact, almost humongous, if one may say. But what is the challenge is that the organization of India's higher education institutions is very complex. It is complex because when I tell 1,200 universities, it must be understood that these all are not at the same level of performance. They are at varying levels, and that can be attributed to many factors. Now, out of this 1,200 universities, firstly, let us come to the funding pattern and the governance pattern. So there are centrally funded, centrally governed institutions, like you're collaborating with AMU, which is a central university, whereas yours is a private university under a particular state government. There are centrally funded institutions like the central universities, the IITs, the NITs, the ISERs. These are all, there are about 150 such institutions directly governed by the Government of India ministries. Bulk of them, of course, are governed by the Ministry of Education, but there are 17 other ministries like the Department of Shipping, the Ministry of Textiles. They all have centrally funded institutions under them. Now that is I would say, the cream of the institutions, because their funding is extremely high, coming directly from the public exchequer, whereas the second level is the state universities, which are state public funded institutions, not like Integral University, which is a private state university, but which are state funded public institutions. And these institutions are the second level. Then comes the third level, like your own university, which are the state level private universities. Then you have a few deemed universities, which the UGC assigns a status of being deemed universities. And then you have another categorization of unitary universities and affiliating universities. So the state public funded universities are all affiliating universities, under whom that 48,000 colleges are affiliated to. And the standalone institutions are those which offer basically teacher education, pharmacy education, maybe management. In some cases, standalone institutions have it for nursing. So there are hotel management. These are some standalone institutions. Now, where is the complexity coming? The governing structures of each of these institutions vary. No, needless to say, for someone who comes from a private university, it is usually a person who has invested and is set up either by registration of the Societies Act or by the Companies Act, and they adhere to those governing structures as laid down by those statutes or those acts that are there in position. As opposed to that, the state-funded institutions, which are public-funded institutions, have a governing structure as per the regulations laid down by the state government. And those which are centrally funded, obviously, are those which are governed by the government of India. Now, when you say unitary and affiliating, before I come to unitary and affiliating, let me talk on the funding dichotomy. The 150 centrally funded institutions which get enormous funding from the government of India actually cater to only 6% of that 44 million students. As opposed to that, state-funded institutions, which are actually getting very little government funding, some development grants come from the UGC, the state government gives some funding, but the two cannot be matched. For example, a central university on an average gets about 240 crores annually. As opposed to that, a state university may be getting a paltry 30 to 40 crores annually. And a state private university, of course, is at the, will depend upon what kind of private university, whether that management is putting in a lot of investment for education or not. Now, the tragedy is that these state-funded institutions which have less funding face faculty shortages, infrastructure deficit, are not having all the teaching learning resources in terms of technology, library, laboratory, and many other things, but they cater to 94% of the student population. So the fact remains that we need to change the manner in which state institutions get funding. And please understand, when I tell you that they get a paltry 40 to 30 crores of funding annually, these state universities are taking care of the affiliated colleges. That's where that quality is getting flattened out altogether. So India has this uniqueness of having the largest higher education system in the world, one of the largest, but having very poor quality parameters, which is reflected in the global rankings. Whether you take up the Times ranking or the Shanghai ranking or the QS rankings, we have less than about 20 to 30 institutions featuring in the top 300 bracket. And that has to be addressed, which is what the NEP said in terms of making accreditation more easy, making it binary, not having a lot of complexity in that, then encouraging our own institutions to participate in the national level rankings, and more than anything else, trying to see where is the focus of higher education and whether we can restructure the entire affiliating system to move away from affiliation to becoming degree granting autonomous colleges. So on this part, NEP has said 2 or 3 important things. One, whether the higher education institutions in India can start identifying what is the main role that it wishes to perform. And the 3 functions of higher education, you all know, are teaching, research, and extension. The one reason why we have not been able to feature in the global rankings is the disconnect between teaching and research. And for the first time, therefore, we are talking about whether every higher education institution can focus on its own goals, whether it is focusing on more of teaching or more on research, which led to a new architecture that we are talking about teaching intensive universities or research intensive universities or multidisciplinary education and research universities combining both teaching and research at an equal level, and that from the affiliation we move towards degree granting autonomous colleges. So 4-fold changes that we are talking about, where we are talking about some institutions becoming teaching intensive universities, where their focus is on basically undergraduate education, and in a few disciplines where they have very strong departments focus on PG and doctoral studies. As opposed to that, research intensive will focus largely on PG and doctoral, and in a few disciplines focus on undergraduate education. The MERUs, or the multidisciplinary education and research universities, we want them to give equal emphasis to both teaching and research, and therefore at a very comprehensive level in across various disciplines, that they would be able to focus on both teaching as well as research. Now the main catch is the affiliation system. When we wrote NEP in 2020, and please understand 5 years of the policy has gone through because we have completed 5 years on 29 July 2025. We wanted that by 2040, India will see a landscape in which out of that 48,000 affiliated colleges, many will form together as a cluster university. Many could convert themselves to become constituent colleges like the DU pattern. Many could convert, if they were already having potential for excellence, to become a teaching intensive university. So we are going to see a kind of a churning that will happen, but that can happen only through a governance instrumentality, which is what we have said in the policy of an institutional development plan. So we want every HEI in this country to see for itself whether it would like to perish by 2040, completely becoming unviable, or whether it would like to sort of structure itself into a new format based on its own strategic planning and based on its own action plan. I'll come to the IDP a little while from now. But it is important to understand that if India's higher education system has to be globally of a competitive nature, we must be able to abandon the more of the same attitude and completely shift towards paradigm changes in which we would like to see a lot of structural changes with greater focus on the quality of higher education. Which brings me to the second challenge of India's higher education, which is that qualitatively we are no match to the quantitative numbers. I already said that. It is hardly reflected in the rankings, but there are other reasons also, systemic reasons why that has happened. The reason why Indian higher education institutions don't feature in the global rankings is not just because of the low funding or the lack of infrastructure or the faculty shortages. It is also certain approaches in our focus in the curricula. We have focused a lot on undergraduate teaching, in which there was rote-based learning and very little outcome-based education, therefore resulting in the poor learning outcomes and a major criticism that the graduates do not have the employability characteristics or the graduate attributes that can entitle them to get jobs. So very high incidence of graduate unemployment and let us say underemployed graduates. You are an engineer but working as a clerk. You are a qualified doctoral candidate but working at, not at all matching to your doctoral qualification. That's all being very underemployed graduates. So the reasons that emanate is because of certain disconnects that we are trying to set right. And that is that teaching and research, we saw it in the Indian system as being two separate identities, whereas the understanding has to be that teaching and research complement one another and must be seen in an integrative manner. That is how in your 4-year undergraduate program, when we talk about the common courses or the foundation courses, we have introduced the idea of having research skills. We have also said that students can take up research projects as a part of the component of the UG program. And we introduced in the 4th year the option of having it with research. And we created the National Research Foundation, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, ANRF, mainly to break this disconnect that historically we have been doing for years on end and decades on end, in which teaching and research were not seen in an amalgamated manner. And therefore, creating a culture of research and an ecosystem of research at the undergraduate level. And please understand, I'm not having the time, but right from school education, these changes have been incorporated so that children move away from rote-based learning to analytical thinking, to cognitive thinking, to problem solving, developing a scientific temper, and the entire pedagogy, assessment, and transaction that we have will be aligned to moving away from rote-based learning to more critical skills, what we call the 21st century skills of communication, collaboration, and so on. So that shift is happening right in school education, and we are carrying it forward in the higher education so as to bridge this so-called divide or hiatus that we had created over the decades between teaching and research. Extending that further, we have given emphasis to the idea that it's not just enough for children to learn or students to learn. They also need to be nurtured to be capable of research and capable of innovation. So that pipeline goes as teaching, research, and innovation. The other side is the skills part of it. We made another major mistake where we thought about skills and knowledge as being two separate verticals. And therefore, for a long time in India, we had a national skill qualification framework and a national higher education qualification framework, as if they were two separate streams. It is now that we have realized that skilling has to be embedded within an undergraduate program, and skilling is an essential component along with knowledge, so as to bring about skill-based, experiential-based, and hands-on capabilities in our students. So the skills education, which we normally call as vocational education, has to be understood in a very wider context of the MSME sector, the tourism sector, the retail sector, the IT sector, and looking at not preparing students to become carpenters or plumbers or masons and so on, but preparing them for jobs that these sectors will look at in terms of logistics and retail management, as well as digital marketing, Internet of Things, agribusiness management, many new areas where a different kind of skill sets will have to be there, and therefore skills along with knowledge are embedded together in the 4-year undergraduate program. That we extended skilling further to talk about entrepreneurship, where you are giving students the kind of training to develop entrepreneurial skills, set up their own enterprises, for which higher education institutions must have startups, must allow for incubation centers, must conduct hackathons. And while I'm talking all this, please ask yourself whether we are doing any of these things or we are only talking about it theoretically. And if not, think about how you can get back into your own institution so that you are able to bring about these kind of changes. Now, therefore, on the quality part of it, the NEP has tried as far as possible to give emphasis to research, to skilling, in terms of the setting up of the NRF, the idea of entrepreneurial education, hackathons, incubation centers, creating industry academia interaction cells. All these are woven into the kind of curricular and the kind of changes in pedagogy and so on, so that children are getting exposed to not just becoming parrots, and where they are merely by-hearting something and vomiting it out on their answer frame, but are developing their capabilities and their competencies, by which we hope that we will move towards what we call better quality education. And embedded with this whole idea is the importance of outcome-based education, but that I'll come to when I talk about the issue of faculty. The third challenge that we are looking at is India's own social, economic, regional, gender disparities in our educational participation. So while NEP talked about a quantitative target of GER in higher education to reach 50% by 2035, it is important to understand that it has to be a sustainable GER, where all cross sections of the society, whereas that is irrespective of caste, class, location, gender, abilities, everyone gets an equal right of participating both in school education and in higher education. So the chapters 6 and 14 of the National Education Policy tried to address this idea of equity and inclusion by categorizing a set of people or persons as coming from the socially and economically disadvantaged groups, such as the SCs, the STs, the OBCs, the linguistic and religious minorities, women, transgenders, urban poor, children with physical disabilities, learning disabilities, those living in geographically inaccessible areas, children from vulnerable sections like migrant labor and born out of exploitation and so on. For all this, we talked about specific interventions so that their educational participation levels go up. And more importantly, since you come from a private university, that the policy clearly said that both public funded and private institutions will provide the means blind and merit-based application so that all meritorious students will get scholarships and free ships to be able to take up higher education. So this is how we try to address that aspect. The next is in the models of education. Now, the fact that we are sitting here in an online session, the fact that we are still at a very nascent stage in the way we use it, but the reality is that integration of technology into the delivery, into the curricular transaction, into the assessment, all this becomes very important, as well as for educational management and data management and so on. So integration of technology, and when I'm saying technology, you must also factor in that we have already reached a stage where AI needs to come in. where we need to have courses on AI, and where our teachers, our own faculty, you and me, should not shy away from using AI, but should be adept at using AI in our own classrooms. I have my own reservations after talking and conducting continuously FDP programs. Are we as faculty somewhere letting the system down altogether? Because I don't think we are doing fair justice to the kind of models that require us to use technology. But the NEP very clearly said that, having accounted for the fact that there is a lot of digital divide in this country, and we have digital haves and have-nots, the way higher education has to go forward is to look at open and distance learning, is to look at blended models of learning, is to look at hybrid methods in our own classroom transaction, going in for online education, massive open online courses, and we are moving towards an era where it might be quite possible that by 2050 or so, we may move much more in terms of the ratio of virtual learning than face-to-face learning. In fact, in the presentations that we are making for Viksit Bharat, which is 100 years of India's independence by 2047, one of the questions looming in our minds is whether the physical face-to-face education would become completely redundant by about 2050 or so. And if we are looking at scenarios of that kind, all our brick and mortar institutions, unless they become capable of hybrid models and combining online learning and so on, might become extinct. It is like the dinosaur which got extinct. We may not like to face that reality, but it is a fact that unless we are factoring technology and making technology as a leveraging point for enhancing the teaching learning experiences and for more enriched teaching learning methods, it is unlikely that our students would start coming into our classes. They would feel that it is meaningless to come into higher education institutions. So the onus of responsibility is on us in the way we use technology, integrate it in a very effective manner by using these new models that we are talking about, and not shying away from use of technology. So you will all know that under the 4-year undergraduate program, as per the guidelines of the UGC, earlier 20% could be through online courses, which has been enhanced by double to 40% of the credits that can be done through online education. Now, the next challenge that we have is in terms of the governance itself, which I'll come to and therefore talk about it a little later, in terms of the autonomy and the accountability and the balancing, whether the government in its effort to say that public taxpayers' money is invested is over interfering in the autonomy of a higher education institution. And if so, what are the internal checks and balances that we need to have? What are the changes that we need to bring about in the governing structures and in the processes that we follow? So I'll come to that again because I don't want to be repeating with the time constraint. But on autonomy and accountability directly refers to the internal governing structures and the need to balance it in a very effective manner through internal checks and balance with minimal interference from the government, but at the same time not being left not being left completely unaccountable. Accountability in terms of academic outputs, accountability in terms of good administration, accountability in terms of good financial management, all becomes a combination of efficiency and effectiveness that higher education institutions must be able to adopt. The next challenge that I'm coming to is the quality of teaching. For someone who was a teacher who had gone into the government of India, I have been at the receiving end to hear from bureaucrats that India's higher education system has failed because of the poor quality of teaching, and that they attribute directly to the quality of teachers. It is very difficult to convince them that teachers are the let us say at the receiving end of a system that is there. So they feel that firstly that we came into teaching because we never got another job. Second, that having come into teaching, we lack the professionalism and we are not serious about our job. And to overcome all that, we wrote in the chapter 13 and many other sections on teacher education, the need for professionalism in the quality of faculty positions, and that comes about by creating conditions of service so that minimum working conditions are provided in terms of basic amenities, a nice staff room, having drinking water, good toilets being available, spaces where teachers can sit and function. Along with that, the understanding that in higher education, unlike in school education, where they come in with a certain pre-service teacher qualification of B.Ed, we go in with only our doctoral qualification. And for many times in the ministries and in the planning commission, there was this feeling that should higher education faculty undergo a certificate course for teaching. And I said nothing can be more insulting to a faculty who's already a PhD holder to do a certificate course in teaching so that they develop the skill of teaching. That is how the National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, which Dr. Raza said, came into being, which we wrote as part of the 12th plan recommendation, that higher education faculty must get continuous professional development, right from induction meetings, right from faculty induction programs, so that they are young faculty who are inducted into teaching and who undergo a rigorous induction program so that they are able to cope with all the requirements of good teaching, good research, and many other things. And then having faculty development centers, teaching learning centers, and a variety of other measures so that faculty have capacity building programs in which they have opportunities for their continuous training, retraining on a regular basis. And then obviously they are able to perform better. So training, professional development on a continual basis, along with a combination of moving towards outcome-based education, is what we wrote in the NEP as important recommendations, whereby the 1.6 million faculty, if they actually are trained and adopt the outcome-based approach, we may be able to address the criticism, a very strong criticism, that it is because of us that India faces very poor quality of higher education graduates. So if we have to overcome that, when the fingers are pointing towards us, we need to be able to change and move away from the traditional pedagogies of lecturing and moving to more innovative pedagogies and so on. Time does not permit me. I would have loved to talk more about that, but maybe in the question answer session, if there are, I can touch upon it. But it is important to understand that we have written elaborately on not only the continuous professional development of teachers for better effective teaching and better research outputs, but also as becoming the future leaders of higher education institution. So academic leadership is embedded into the teacher's professional development, which is what I'll be talking about in a short while from now. The two other factors which are challenges in India's higher education is the importance of cross-border higher education or internationalization of higher education. So NEP has talked about student mobility, faculty mobility, credit mobility through joint degrees, twinning programs, dual degrees, and also talking about foreign universities setting up their campuses here and vice versa. But the fact remains that collaboration is the key to 21st century learning, and internationalization of higher education must be pursued more vigorously given the large numbers of our students who are migrating outside India for both undergraduate and higher levels of education. So we are seeing a systematic increase in the number of students. About 7.5 lakh students go out every year, and India attracts only a very minuscule 40,000 students coming in largely from the South-based countries, a few from African countries, and so on. Whereas if we are talking about India going back to its glory of having been seen as attracting foreign scholars, we must be able to think of internationalization at home, and our own universities must start dual degrees so that students feel that on campuses in our own universities, we are getting joint degrees and dual degrees and twinning programs. So why should we actually have a drain of our own resources by going and studying outside? So pursuing internationalization at home becomes very important as a part of the collaborations that we are talking about. And the last part is on the funding challenge. So NEP talked about what Kothari Commission's report said in 1968, that we will spend 6% of the GDP on education. That is the entire education sector. School, higher, technical, professional, everything taken together. We are somewhere in the range of about 4%. And when we say 4%, please understand, it is the government of India along with the state governments. And when I say government of India, it is 17 government of India ministries, not just the Ministry of Education. This entire pooling of funds from the public exchequer, the Consolidated Fund of India, we are spending for school education on a higher side, more or less in the range of about nearly 2.5 or above, and in higher education, less than about 1 or 1.25. And the fact remains that while it is aspirational that we must reach that 6% of GDP, the reality on the other side is a systematic withdrawal or reduction in the public funding. So while the NEP has clearly said that we need to strengthen public funded institutions, it has also said that the role of the private sector, right from early childhood care to higher education, technical education, professional education, is recognized. There is still a lot of opportunities by which we leverage more funds into the higher education space. One is, of course, to leverage the corporate sector funding, which is largely where companies and big business houses and corporate houses have CSR funds, which they need to start giving to the higher education institutions. Second is to leverage funding that comes in from industry for research purposes. Third is where they can come in for ancillary functions such as managing the hostel or running a mess or running the transportation and so on. But the question is, we don't seem to talk to these people at all. Nobody comes with a bag of money and gives it to us in colleges and universities. We need to go out, start looking at it, and therefore the NEP talks in terms of leveraging funding from other sources other than the government, so that we are able to achieve our higher goals of not only inclusive education, but also in terms of good quality research, having better teaching learning facilities, ensuring that all our faculty positions are there, all this. And we are talking about possibly PPP models, public-private partnership, alumni funding, philanthropic funding that can come in from individuals. These are all being provided for, other than, of course, what is generally understood as CSR funding. So this picture that I painted before you is the reality of India's higher education, which has a complex set of challenges, ranging from poor quality to poor research, to lesser understanding of skills, to poor governance, lesser understanding of internationalization, and not at all addressing many of the things related to disparities, because unless India looks at a sustainable model, sustainable development would mean everyone getting good quality education, which is what SDG 4 goal reads as, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education with lifelong learning opportunities for all. Brings me to the area of the importance of academic leadership in higher education. So we have seen instances of universities and institutions being headed by retired bureaucrats, retired army officials, people from industry, so many other people. People, maybe scientists could be acceptable, but people who are not at all there in the business of education. And NEP is very clear that all higher education institutions must be led and their governing bodies must be driven largely by people who are there in academia. And that is why, as I told you at the beginning, this topic becomes important, that we as faculty firstly believe we are academic leaders, and we are academic leaders who will go on to head academic institutions. And it is not for that we continue only as teachers and some retired bureaucrat or a serving bureaucrat or a retired army person. These are not the people who should be heading academic institution. Let's be very clear about it. It is people who are there in academia who must be proving worthy that they have the leadership qualities to head academic institutions. So to become a good academic leader, under that same mission, National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, we were looking at programs like Centers for Academic Leadership and Educational Management. AMU has a center. We had conducted a lot of leadership development programs as part of it. Then we conducted a very high-end level program called LEAP, which was for a leadership for academicians program, which was a 3-week program, 2 weeks in India and 1 week with a foreign university. All this as an attempt to nurture academic leaders from the faculty fraternity itself and not from outside. And for that, it is important as a faculty to identify what are the qualities that makes us a good leader. A good academic leader must be capable of visioning and strategizing. As an exercise, I can ask you, if you have visited the website of your own university, of course, Integral University is a fairly young university, but many of the universities and colleges set up years ago have never revisited their vision, mission, goals, and objectives. These are not to be cast in stone. They have to respond to the changes within the society. So today's vision and mission statement of an NEP, of a higher education institution, must look at technology, must look at environment, must look at sustainability, must look at many aspects which are requiring us to become engines of growth, not engines of stagnation. Our HEIs are engines of stagnation, where no growth is happening. I'm sorry to be very critical, but this is how we have all understood the reason for India's maladies in higher education. We are engines of growth. If we are engines of growth, then we should be futuristic. We should be looking at future goals and equipping our students with those kind of capabilities and competencies. If our own vision and mission is something which is very rudimentary and very, very short-sighted, how do you think we will even achieve any of that in our academic programs, in our academic deliveries, in the kind of activities and initiatives that we need to do? So visioning and strategizing. Then a good leader must have effective communication skills. Higher education institutions are not like industries or corporate houses, where there are only two categories of people, the employer and the employee, or the officers and the employees. Here, we are a complex set. We are faculty, we are administrative staff, we have technical staff, we have non-academic ancillary staff, we have students. All of them are complex. We need to be having channels of communication with all these people so that our institution functions on a daily basis without a lot of conflicts that happen. And which brings to the next quality of effective conflict resolution, which can come in only if a good leader is a good decision maker. Conflict resolution, when you resolve conflicts in a timely manner, only then higher education institutions can become effective, which means instead of procrastinating, you need to take decisions in a timely manner. That is your decision-making capability. Then in terms of students and teachers, for students, good support services and good teaching and learning. For teachers, providing opportunities for their capacity building and all amenities for effective teaching and research. Then a good leader must know how to administer, that is administrative management. We can depend on the registrar He can depend on administrative staff, but he also should be aware of the statutes, the rules and regulations, and so on. So also for the financial management. And the last two qualities are, as I said in my challenges, how can my institution become, firstly, exist 100 years from now, that we don't perish. And to do that, what kind of collaborations are needed? What kind of technology needs to be adopted? What kind of research should we take forward? So that entire gamut in terms of looking at higher education institution from its larger ramifications, and how to collaborate for interdisciplinary education, for combining teaching and research, for looking at the whole idea of technology and embedding that all. And the final part relating to the external sources of funding and enhancing internal revenue generation. So that's not financial management. That's more in terms of being very forward looking in terms of doing strategic financing of your higher education institution, not saying government se to paisa aaya hi nahi hai to hum kya karenge. That is not the way you look at it. You need to start looking at what can we do so that we are able to get more and more revenue coming in at the internal level, what kind of external funding can come in so that we can do many of these things. Which brings me to what the NEP talked about in terms of better governance and ensuring that higher education institutions, though they are autonomous institutions, remain very accountable. So all of you know that universities have a senate or a board of management, then they have a court, they have an executive body, they have their research councils, they have academic councils, there are a number of governing bodies. The question is whether all these governing bodies follow very fair, transparent, standard operating protocols, that the rules and regulations apply uniformly to all individuals, irrespective of their caste, community, creed, whatever it is. Whether we do that and whether we are completely fair and transparent. And that is where NEP talks about technology. Even for accreditation, even for data management, even for enterprise resource planning, the need for higher education institutions to embrace technology so that all methods that are there are available in public domain, and you don't have to do an inspector Raj or physical inspection, which breeds corruption in our country. Rather than that everything is available in the public domain. That's how in accreditation also, we said abandon this so-called visits that you have, which is a hotbed for corruption in our country, and move away from that to using data-driven and technologically driven formats by which random visits can be made, but otherwise that data should be available for everyone to see. The data of a higher education institution, what is the kind of courses we run, who are the faculty they take, what are the faculty qualifications, what are the student numbers, what are the departments there, what are the non-academic staff there, everything in today's time need not be done in formatting and writing your very elaborate self-study reports, which itself is a deterrent for accreditation. India's higher education has less than about 15% of its institutions going for accreditation, because if they are scared about doing the accreditation process itself. And to change that, we have said adopt technology. And therefore, one of the reforms that we are suggesting is the extensive use of technology in data management, which has put forward this idea of all institutions having only one data point being one, whether it is used for All India Survey of Higher Education, whether it is used for NIRF ranking, whether it is used for NAC accreditation, whether it is used for NBA, let that data source remain the same. Let not faculty be overburdened with this kind of data related work, which I think takes away your good time away from pure academics and quality of teaching towards doing this kind of activity, which is what the NEP has talked about, and using ERP solutions so that there is a fair and transparent method and public probity is there. But that public probity is not by certain people coming from certain organizations and physically visiting and continuing with an inspector Raj regime. which we know has not really made a lot of difference. Rather, it has resulted in inbreeding, it has resulted in a lot of corruption, it has resulted in not so worthy institutions getting ranked, a lot of things which are all the unpleasant and the negative part of India's higher education. So we have clearly said in the NEP, as a governance strategy, the wide and extensive use of technology for probity, to ensure accountability, to ensure public probity, is there through transparent processes which are available in the public domain. The second is in terms of having a good governing body. So while all your bodies are there, we have clearly said that we should have an empowered board of governors, and whether you would like to replace an existing board of governors or an executive council to become the empowered board of governors is the choice of the institution. I don't think we should go into micromanaging higher education institutions, and the policy did not want to do the micromanagement. But the empowered board of governors has a certain uniqueness about it. We think of the board of management or the executive council as largely people coming from the government, from the local political parties, and others are there because they are there in the institution itself. Whereas what we have said is an empowered board of governors must be a democratically nominated body created by the institution itself, which represents a cross section of stakeholders. The senior management of your own institution must have educationists, must have people who are scientists, people from the agriculture sector, people from all walks of life, sports, culture, and so on, the members of the local community, student representatives, teacher representatives, parent representatives. So the empowered board of governors is a collegiate body which will exclude bureaucrats, which will exclude people from government, except where it is nominally required that they are represented as one person. But otherwise, the collective body will be representing these major stakeholders, and they will be the ones which is choosing what should be the strategy and so on, through what I told you about that instrumentality, which is an institutional development plan. The institutional development plan is nothing but a strategic action plan that every college and every university, whether public or private, has to prepare, so that it is envisioning for itself in the coming 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and long term, even in 15 years, where you would like to see your college or your university going forward. And you need to have clear quantifiable targets in terms of access for GR, in terms of equity for the social classes, in terms of quality for accreditation, for capacity building, for research, and many other things. Then in terms of accountability, what are the kind of, let us say, performance indicators we have, and in terms of affordability. So with certain clear KPIs, we are able to sort of prepare action plans, which has to be prepared by a task force within the institution, just like that empowered board of governors must be a representative body of all these people: teacher representative, student representative, parent representative, retired educationists, senior management, civil society, sports persons, culture persons, all these people coming in, because you would like to see your institution, how it would be shaping in the coming years. And that document is not an outsourced third-party activity given as a contract to somebody else, but to be done by the institution itself. That is when that sense of ownership comes. And the document, once prepared, is a living document with clear timelines, with budgets to be used for monitoring and review, and then seeing every year, did we achieve it? If we did not achieve it, what were the reasons we didn't achieve it? Do the course correction, and then work on the revised targets. And it is not something that you make once and throw it on the shelf of some library and it is an archival material. Rather, it has to be a living document so that we strategize our higher education institutions. Just imagine if all our institutions did that. Clear focus, clear strategy, clear actionable targets, how to achieve it, what timeline, with what budget, and it is pursued on a systematic basis. I'm sure we will be bringing about a lot of transformation. So for the governance, both the bodies will ensure that autonomy and accountability are balanced. We work together collectively. So higher education, any education is a socializing process, and we should take everyone in that local community together. Only then we are able to achieve the targets. And when I talk about the quality parameters, all your indicators, your key performance indicators of outcome-based education, of ranking, of accreditation, of faculty training, of student innovation, all these come into it. What kind of research happened, industry academia linkages, did we conduct hackathons, how many teachers went on training outside, all these factors, it's broken down. It is completely made into clear actionable points. And if you are interested, you may have a look. If you Google my name and you write IDP, you can get access to my research gate to be able to see that article that I'd written on IDP, so that you can think of preparing an IDP for your own institution. The last point that I will talk about, when we talk about governance and management of higher education, a word about the external regulation. So you're all aware that we talked about overthrowing the existing regulatory architecture in our higher education system, where you are largely having the UGC, AICT, NCT, like that you have 17 professional councils. But what has happened is that the professional bodies, 17 professional bodies, starting with our own UGC, combines 4 functions within itself. It takes care of academic standard setting, all your curricular frameworks and so on. It regulates the higher education system, what can be done, what cannot be done, what has to be shut down, all that. Funding and accreditation. Now, this is a clear violation of any division of powers. It's like saying in a democratic system, be it presidential or parliamentary, you cannot have the legislature, executive, and the judiciary in one body. And it's exactly that what has happened, where the UGC as a body in 1956, created by an act of the parliament, when India had only 50 universities, till today, with 1,200 universities, 12,000 or 13,000 standalone institutions, 48,000 colleges, is still combining within itself 4 functions of regulation, funding, accreditation, and standard setting. Obviously, it cannot perform. And that is why the NEP said, let us separate these powers. And you must have heard that phrase, light but tight regulation. Making it light how? By separating regulation, funding, academic standard setting, and accreditation in 4 independent verticals: National Higher Education Regulatory Council for regulation, National Accreditation Council, not the existing NAC or NBA, a super accreditor called the National Accreditation for accreditation, the HEGC for funds, because UGC becomes null and void, and the professional standard setting bodies, all the regulatory bodies, AICT, NCT, all of them become professional standard setting bodies. Since UGC would be null and void, we talked about a general education council. So 4 independent bodies with an umbrella architecture called the Higher Education Commission of India. This legislation should have been introduced in the parliament, and it was told by the MOS for education even in this monsoon session, but it has not been tabled on the floor of the house. A lot requires to be done because education is a subject in the concurrent list. It is important that we talk to the states so that this major regulatory reform is not done without consensus building with all the federating units. So governance and management of India's higher education, as envisaged in the NEP, is looking at a complete transformation from its internal governance, from addressing some of the systemic challenges within itself, looking at good leadership, looking at instrumentalities of IDP, looking at an empowered board of governors, looking at leveraging technology for fair and transparent governance. All these are things we need to embrace so that our higher education institutions are both effective and efficient organizations which can achieve the intended goals and outcomes rather than seeming to be confused entities, becoming more and more complex and becoming unproductive and counterproductive in not being able to achieve the goals. And as faculty, we must not only be sensitive to it, but we must rise up to the occasion to be able to do your might or our own little bit so that we can transform the institutions within which we work. Thank you. I'll stop here and keep about 10 minutes for interaction.
Dear participants, if you have any query, please ask. Okay. Anybody have any question? Then please quickly ask. Otherwise, we wind up. Okay. So thank you, ma'am, for your lecture, and I'm surely, but I'm also a little bit disappointed that nobody have asked any question, and I certainly discussed with our faculty members that what are the reasons and why this is a kind of monologue there. So, anyway, it's part of learning. We are here to learn something from great personalities, and definitely we'll try to improve ourselves. So, thank you very much, ma'am, and surely we will try to improve in future, and we will try to absorb as much as possible in our academic life. And we are in the process of implementing NEP, as I have told you in the beginning. We do face certain unanswered questions with multiple entry and exit, although it seems better for students, but again it's a really big challenge to actually implement, because if in India we don't have identical syllabus and identical curriculum delivery structure in throughout the India. So if a student is getting out from our university from second year, he might not get means the other subjects in third year, and so maybe he will repeat some courses, or he may left with some courses. So it's a great tool, but still it needs to be refined, I think, much, so that if we have a common minimum curriculum kind of structure, which is also, I think, suggested by NEP. So when our universities are matured enough to get these kind of syllabuses, then I'm sure it will be a good thing to adopt. So I think Professor
Yes, sir.
Teresa
Yes,
has
sir.
raised the hand.
Ma'am,
Ma'am,
a very good
would you
evening
like
to you,
to-
ma'am. Apology because on my side I was not able to open my camera. I would have been happy to actually face you. Ma'am, thank you so much for that elaborative session, what you have really stated, ma'am. I was able to really learn things. My question, because I belong to the state of Telangana, ma'am, I have this question. The implementation of NEP from the state government is what restricts us, because ours is an autonomous college, ma'am, self-financed college, a degree and a PG college, ma'am. The restrictions which we face from the government of Telangana, which has not taken initiative to implement NEP, is a constraint what we are facing today. Would you like to address that, ma'am? And I'm very happy to know that you are a part of this NEP drafting, ma'am. I'm very happy to meet you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
So at least I think it is important to understand that NEP may not have been received by all the states at the same level at which we may have liked. You know that there are states which have reversed NEP, states which have completely opposed the NEP, and states which have become non-starters, like in your own case of Telangana. What I would say as an academic is that the structure of an undergraduate program may be impacted depending upon a state not implementing it, because we may continue with the 3-year program and not have an option for the 4th year. But there is nothing that stops colleges, whether you're autonomous or whether you're public funded, to adopt all the reforms that relate to curricular changes, that relate to pedagogy and assessment. Please understand, universities are autonomous entities. And in your curricula, if you want to introduce multidisciplinarity and you want to have core courses which may be of X discipline and elective courses which is of another discipline, incorporate internships, incorporate skill-based courses, these are at the liberty of the higher education institutions. Of course, if state governments come forward, where many of the states have done and brought about the regulations, it becomes an easier, let us say, path to implement it. But even in the case of where it has not come, where it has even been opposed, where it has even been reversed, I would still say that as academic institutions, nothing can come in the way of our implementing academic reforms. No state government can have the guts to say that your institutions should not innovate in curricula, should not deploy effective pedagogies, and should have very robust, let us say, assessment systems. No government will take the risk to say that they will oppose it. So what prevents us is we don't have to wait for directions to come. Let's start adopting these reforms itself within our own institutions. As and when those regulations come, we can move from the 3-year to the 4-year. We can have the multiple entry and exit. We can become a part of the ABC, the Academic Bank of Credit. That all happen as and when the regulation. But start with the academic reforms and start with the outcome-based education. That is how I would say, so that we are not, feeling let down that we have not got NEP in our state. It is a process. We also did not expect that all these states would go at the same level and the pace, which makes me also answer what Dr. Raza has raised, that we need not worry, because if your institution is having it and another institution is not having it, that should not come in the way of mobility at all. We should never be keen upon uniformization of the syllabi. Higher education institutions to an 80% have a similar kind of a curricula. And the 20% which you have a leeway, that autonomy, I think we must be enjoying, and we must allow for us to have different set of, frame our curricula in the way that we want. Now, a student moving from one institution to another, even if there are some different set of courses, it's a learning trajectory that they need to look at, not whether the same course is available. In fact, it need not be the same course at all. So let us not have our structured thinking. We are not able to give our baggage of the structured systems from which we came, in which the curriculum looks more or less the same across. Let that heterogeneity be there, and students will be benefiting more out of a heterogeneity rather than from a homogeneity. That is the way to look at it. I hope you are able to understand the spirit with which I am saying.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to very happily state here that yes, our college has implemented outcome-based education, ma'am, very successfully implemented. And what you stated, multidisciplinary, yes, ma'am, we were able to do that also. And I was the Skill Development Center convener, ma'am, having implemented 39 different courses with an MOU, with MOUs with other institutions, along with foreign university, ma'am. Yes, we were able to do this also, ma'am, skill courses, pedagogy, each and every faculty implements a different innovative teaching methodology as a criteria to in charge. I've also given briefing to these faculty, new faculty also, ma'am. We were able to do that. Curricular aspects, yes, ma'am, as you have stated, 20%, we definitely change it. Academically, we have done that, ma'am, curriculum change also. Open electives also we have given to students, ma'am, for MBA students as well as BBA students, UG students as well. We have also given generic elective as an option where they can also study from the different set of programs, ma'am, which are widely available in our college. And also evaluation, like you said, we have
so that is what I'm trying to say, whether a government follows it or not.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we as educators should be having a very detached view of policy with politics.
Yeah.
The
And
politics happens in a certain manner. We need not be bogged down by that at all.
True,
and it's more about carrying forward the reforms that we would like to take forward.
Yeah, one 4-year program we have started last year, ma'am. I think we fulfilled that as well as you told. Only one thing we were not able to do, ma'am, is students who can change from one course to another, where they can shift from one college to another.
That doesn't matter really, Dr. Teresa. That is all about, reaching a level of maturity and good preparedness, so that if you cannot do one part of it, that should not be a kind of a negative. It is more in an evolving process.
Yes,
and I think as the maturity happens, we should be in a position to embrace that.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Ifa Zareen, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Do you like to say something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Ma'am, this is Ifat Zareen Ahmed. I am professor of bioengineering at Integral University, Lucknow. First of all, I would like to congratulate you, ma'am, for such a wonderful talk. It was such an elaborative talk on NEP. We got to know so many things from you. Ma'am, you talked about CSR funding. And I just need a little more guidance on this. How can we acquire? Do they give funding to the higher education institutes also? And how do we go? How do we get to know about it? And how do we acquire those funds?
Your university, Integral University, is a private university.
Yes,
as a private university, there are certain limitations of mobilizing CSR funds unless the management of Integral University has an understanding with other corporate houses. They may not necessarily come forward very easily, whereas normally it is a public funded institution who need to leverage CSR funds. In private entities and private universities, the management of that institution should be able to leverage let us say, the corporate alliances with which they have a sort of a stake in that they may be able to get some funds. But that does not mean that you cannot get CSR funding for research, for high-end kind of activities in AI and technology and so on. I'm sure even Integral University, if there is requirement of more funds of a very high quantum, there would be interested business houses and corporate houses with whom the management of Integral University can sort of leverage their contacts to get that funding. But it is more about how public funded institutions leverage. That is a greater challenge, and where the CSR funds are not exploited at all.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. We'll definitely for these funds. Thank you.
Dear participant, if anybody else? Okay. So thank you very much, ma'am. And you have answered so many queries and delivered the talk on the important issue which we are facing right now. And thank you very much again. You have spared time from your schedule, and we'll always be grateful for what we have learned, and we try to implement it as much as possible in our life. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you,
all the very best.
We'll meet again at 2:30 tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.